And the Yogasutras. The topic of discussion in this talk would be a particular statement in the Yoga Sutras, statement 1.20, which lists a particular set of qualities as preceding prajna. Prajna can be translated as wisdom, knowledge, the ability to directly understand things and thereby gain wisdom. So the first in the series of qualities that are said to precede prajna, which is ability to understand things, knowledge, wisdom, is shraddha. Shraddha can be translated as attention. It is different from the um, everyday sense of just attending to anything or just keeping the attention on something, um, or um, you'll understand it as we discuss. It is about placing the attention where it is to be placed, granting the attention to where it ought to be granted. For instance, there are forms of um exercises that are said to evolve spiritual strengths. Like there is the tradition of Hatha Yoga. Hatha Yoga is just in fact, in an era, it was a French tradition. Um, that is, then there are meditative forms of exercises found in the Oriental nations, such as Tai Chi, Qigong, and so forth. But assume one is doing those exercises, and the idea is um, that it will improve health so that they can go back to attempting to fill their bank accounts again. So the uh, whole attention is elsewhere. Not that uh, trying to fill the bank account is in any way wrong or anything, but if the whole attention becomes that, that is a false placing of attention. The reason is, assume somebody tells you you could take like 100 vitamin pills each day to get healthy. That is a false advice. If you give a lot of attention to that advice, you'll go down the wrong track. There are people who attempt to prolong life by giving a lot of attention to what vitamins they take, what food they take, and so forth. If the entirety of attention falls on that, that's a false focus. Nobody has significantly prolonged life by doing that, or even by living in the most pristine surroundings before the Industrial Revolution. So, with ideal food, water, and air, it can, when somebody is told that they need to just live for making money, the entire focus falls elsewhere. Though their goal is to improve their state, so the goal is to enter a more joyous state, the attention is falling on something that would take them in the opposite course. They'd separate from their own, in awareness of their own inner, you might say, soul being, whatever has those inner strengths as well. So it is like a false path. The same is with today's education and so on. To understand anything, you have to apply the attention to derive a greater purpose, depth from it. The proper placing of attention and the awareness of the purpose of actions should be there. Down the words, Shraddha, Virya, Smriti, Samadhi, Prajna, Purvaka, Iteration. That is Shraddha, Virya, Smriti, and Samadhi Ardi Prajnapurvaka. Ardi would be these are iteration. Prajnapurvaka precedes Prajna. We'll discuss Shraddha. Virya means vitality, virtue, virtue, strength. Smriti means it is translated as memory, but I'll in this slide give a slightly more expanded idea on it. Samadhi is ability to achieve absorption in meditation. Samadhi is treated as a strength or an indriya in Buddhist texts, if I remember what I read right. Smriti. Smriti is translated as memory, but if you research a bit, it is not as if you gain some kind of memory as such. The memory faculty becomes something else. In the process of experience, in some of the texts, at least one particular text apparently has this breakdown. In experiencing something, you experience the bhava of it, the experience itself of it, while there is no awareness of the processes involved. One, like if somebody were to hit a wall, the hand would hurt. In the state of experience itself, that is just that experience alone is there. While in a deeper awareness, one can see the processes involved. One can observe the processes involved. Assume the person hit the wall in a state of anger. In a completely lost in the phenomenon state, the person has no awareness of the processes or an observer state awareness of the processes. In a more deeper state of smriti, one can see, one can observe what physical phenomenon the awareness held, what mathematical phenomenon the awareness held, so that the hand hurt, and why the wall couldn't be broken down. So it is possible, assuming a higher order awareness is not holding the wall, even to uh, break it down, so to speak. In some martial arts, people gain the strength even to break stones and so forth. It is by any measure supernormal because the flesh should be damaged before a stone is broken. And it is not superstitious or imaginary because that is what quantum physics says. If the awareness could hold that state, that would be the state of reality. Another evidence for that particular definition of smriti is the Buddhists use the word sati for the observer state. The corresponding word in Sanskrit to sati is said to be smriti. So that was the ancient sense of the word smriti. Remember, the Buddhists were forming their words and definitions starting over 2,500 years ago. Even if one is to assume the Sanskrit mapping were done afterwards, it was still in a very ancient era where an awareness of the ancient sense of words existed. People used words with an awareness of the meaning in a particular era. So even otherwise, because there is a deeper sense involved, the usage of the words cannot be thought of as just randomly done. So I've given an overall sense of these words: Shraddha, Vidya, Smriti, Samadhi. So if you look at the Vyasabhasha commentary that I had put on the previous slide, and we'll get to that again. Shraddha becomes the foundation for the next state to emerge, and together with the next state, the state afterwards emerges, and so forth. And the Buddhists pay a lot of attention to the process of sati, which in the Sanskrit translation of Buddhist text is smriti. So to understand that word, you could go through the Buddhist sense of the word smriti. We'll see a similar sequence, almost the exact same sequence, occur in the Buddhist body of text, Buddhist knowledge systems. So Shraddha can be broken down into two words, Shraddha and Dha. Associations of the word Shraddha include, in the sense of academic associations, why I say academic associations is because in a traditional sense, Sanskrit is thought to have a very objective structuring within the dynamics of the universe itself. But then again, when sounds have a similarity, one cannot say it is by mere coincidence, chance, or random evolution. Again, relying on the very same theory which says sounds have objective, profounder senses and are not random, not just in the case of Sanskrit. Possible sound associations include hrid, heart, cred, faith, truth, credibility, center, core, are sounds and meanings that are associated with the sound cred. Cred is heart. Cred and cred are also thought to be uh, related sounds by the modern academy. The word dha can mean as in dha as in dharana, the state of meditation. Dha can also mean giving. The sound da, da in Sanskrit means to give, to grant. Here it is dha. As per this particular dictionary, the meaning dha uh, has the sense to grant. An ancient translation is given poshana, to grant, to strengthen, to grant. Dha is also associated with dharana, which is in the sequence of in the one of the states which form samyama, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. It says Proto-Indo-European cred. Cred is the heart. Tha is to place one's heart. To place the attention is Shraddha in that sense. Latin credo, I believe. Western as a word Srastha. Cognate with the Western Srastha. There's a lot of similarity between Sanskrit and the Western. So, Rathedi. This is reconstructed sound in Proto-Indo-European. Proto language is not a language that um, is known to have existed, but drawing from patterns in different languages, one assumes there might have been an underlying in time, more ancient language. That is just an assumption. And then drawing on patterns, one assumes such a sound would have existed in that language. A more ancient sound, so to speak. They study plausible patterns of evolution of sound and then attempt to trace back what would have been. It does not mean that is necessarily how reality works. A particular language can have its own code in the world DNA. And of course, things can manifest as evolving in time, just as DNA forms do manifest as evolving in time. But then to think of things as um, one thing has definitely having been evolved from another, that does not always stand to analysis or reasoning. Yeah, means to do, to put, to place in Proto-Indo-European. Because the ending ti is the third person singular ending. You could ignore that for now. So da is to do, to put, place, and so forth in Proto-Indo-European. Something that we have done here in order to understand the word is to give it attention. Now there is another deeper layer of attention. The reason why we are giving this attention. The reason why we are giving this attention here, because we are seeking a profound understanding of reality. One is seeking a way in which one can evolve. If it were being done just for um, an academic thesis, I'd like to research this, put it there, therefore I'll get a grade, and therefore I'll get a job, therefore I'll do a job, I'll get some money, I'll be happy. The profounder attention that there's an underlying reality in which the awareness can grow, understand things, evolve by understanding things, by gaining an understanding of it, which is why prajna, understanding, appears at the final position in the list. The awareness of such an existent reality is absent when there is no attention on that. In the normal as in the modern, absurd, superficial, academic mode, though it can be glorified on media and glorified by all the glitter, it is empty of substance, it's devoid of substance. One is functioning for nothing, for altering an imaginary number on a few banking systems, banking machines, computers. So the attention placed on the profounder is not there, and the awareness of the profounder also is therefore not there. So the Yoga Sutra 1.20 is this, the Vyasa Bhasha to this, and it's supposedly an ancient commentary by a very prominent sage, almost a yuga ago, who is thought to be immortal as well. Yuga is like a grand amount of time. So the first statement says it has to do with uh, the the path of the yogi, the method of the yogi. The second sense, Shraddha Chetasa Samprasadaha, it says attention grants Samprasadaha, can be read as brightness, depth, and joy, uh, with the grounding in the greater profounder. Chetasaha is the mind and the awareness systems. Sahi Jana Niva Kalyani Yoginam Pati. It says it protects the yogi like the creator goddess and grants protection, well-being, and so forth. The next principle, Vidya, is supposed to arise from there. Sahi Tasya hi Shraddhadanasya Vivekarthino Viryam Upajayate. Um, Virya here also suggests the strength and the ability to understand things, to know things. And it is through the attention principle that um, inner strength, vigor of the awareness arises. Tam upajata viryasya smridar upatishtade. Together with the arising of this vigor of the awareness, uh, smriti. Smriti is not to be understood as memory alone, but analogous to the idea of sati, of, of Pali, of the Buddhist scriptures, which in Sanskrit is smriti in the Buddhist doctrine. It is the ability to be aware of the underlying mechanisms of phenomenon, to be in an observer state. It has associations with memory because memory is a more, a pleb word, a plebeian sense. Even ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics are said to have and do have a sacred sense and a sense that came to be used when it began to be used for everyday writing and usual world trade and so forth. So smriti, even the process of awareness, recollecting the vectors again, has got to do with the memory phenomenon. Recollecting can occur because uh, of the timelines forming a manifold, perhaps. Timelines as in um, the vector sets that are being held, forming a manifold. So even memory can alter, right? Memory can, not just the memory can alter, the past can alter the future. Just as the future can alter, so can the past. And that is called, that is, that reality could be so, is hypothesized in modern physics, and they call it quantum retrocausality. मृत्यु उपस्थाने च चित्तम् अनाकुलं समाधीयते. When Smriti, the Sati process of Pali, when that which is described as Smriti here is established, the Chittam here is the mind, which is the n-dimensional brain vectors, the n-dimensional brain structure becomes aligned, analogous in form, serving the Samadhi principle. Samadhi is the state of absorbed meditation. The third aspect of samyama of the Yoga Sutras. Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi. Dharana and Dhyana have a dynamic nature. Focusing on that which is to be understood, that aspect of reality that which is to be understood. And then you have the Samadhi. When the Samadhi is beyond the DNA world scans, I believe that is what they refer to as nirbija, without the DNA, without the uh, evolving world vector senses or a set of world vectors held, um, which is in the beyond the appeared phenomena. Samahita chittasya prajna viveka upavartate. The Buddhists believe that only the mind that has achieved samadhi in samadhi has the ability to see phenomenon the way it is, to understand phenomenon the way it is. At least it is only the mind that has conquered, achieved the indriya of samadhi, that has the ability to do that, apparently. An analogous statement is here, samahitachitasya prajna viveka upavartate. That is where the prajna viveka, wisdom knowing, functions. It's from where it functions, or through where it functions, or dependent on that it functions. Yena yathartham vastu janati. By that, the way things are and the way its underlying is, it is known. Tadabhyasat tat vishayacha vairagyat asamprajnata samadhir bhavati. By the practice of it, abhyasa, or gaining proficiency in it, one could say, the word vairagya is often translated as turning away from phenomena, or the mind turning away from. Well, if you look at the Vyasa Bhasha and the Yoga text itself, vairagya is to be understood as knowing a phenomenon. In my framework of translating or understanding things, I would say, in knowing a phenomenon in terms of its world operators, awareness operations in the mathematical frame which gives rise to the world sense. There is an underlying mathematical frame to things, which the perceiving of which is done by the buddhi. That's the way I understand. And of course, there is an underlying mathematical frame, which has been spoken of by different traditions. It's evident from the fact that mathematics works to explain phenomena. Even the Greeks were speaking of a plane of so-called mathematical being, as they translate. It is a mathematical artifact that is scanned by the awareness sparks. The individual awareness is scanning out its DNA vector sets, viewing the world phenomenon situated in its DNA pocket, which is a subset of the world DNA. And this DNA is not of just one dimension, but it has an n-dimensional enfoldable nature, unfoldable and enfoldable, infoldable also nature. Whatever. I mean, it can be, projected. The vectors are n-dimensional vectors, which form through operations of adjacent dimensions of low. There are between adjacent dimensions, these vectors are related by operators, and also there are operators binding vectors on the same dimensional zero, and so forth. An addition operator can act on a plane zero, like in the form of a superpositioning sense, as you find in quantum mechanics, or it can bind different order artifacts in the sense of a polynomial, which is why the e power I phenomenon, because the spin is also involved, spin of this artifact is prominent in physics, quantum physics. They do not know why. And multiplication can occur on a zero in a spatial sense, generating a higher order spatial sense. It can occur in the axial sense, generating axial geometries of multiplied intensity, so to speak, and so forth. When an understanding of the underlying exists, when an awareness of the underlying exists, and the attention is being given there, one's idea of the purpose of life is also different. And it is not like what they show on TV, like you become a weird, some kind of a weirdo or a weird ascetic or something like that. No disrespect to, as in I do not intend to disrespect any ascetic. They're taking an intense form. Of course, an intense effort is also allowed. Not necessarily that such an effort is more efficient than um, no, another effort which might seem outwardly easy, at ease. Uh, it is not necessary that just because an outward form seems intense, the progress is more intense. Like they show and show through visual media, like spiritual progress has to do with all kinds of fancy rituals and so forth. Like the Western rituals had to do with water. Vedic rituals, there were rituals that had to do with offering of water and so forth. Uh, Vedic era rituals, rituals of an era. But what I'm saying is, if a person assuming, because this world is an aspect of that which is a surface projection of the solar phenomenon, if one assume while just watering plants or just pouring water on plain earth, assume one is pouring water in the sun and have the intent of a good intent of the welfare of all beings, um, then immediately one's action, um, and then the awareness can also naturally go to the sense that it is not just outer, it is also the inner, because the own individual DNA pocket is situated on the surface of that phenomenon. Anyway, that action itself, because the awareness is involved, can evolve better states in the world, and thereby it can be a good action. It can also be a way of establishing the awareness aligned to a positive action. At a state, one might even feel like the sun itself would express that outward mode of expression is not what is needed at the point. Inward, uh, the solar phenomenon is shining through from the inward as well. So it is, even if you are to think of some particular kind of form, it has nothing to do with any, uh, nothing to do with getting defined down by any particular religion. And beyond that, the normal forms of an era, just like studies, uh, even if it be studies of, you know, usual modern fields, usual subjects of study, uh, they can be, if the awareness is properly placed, leveraged as a way of improving oneself. So here I say one's growth is not about, as they show on media, dullness, going away from the world or anything, but understanding the phenomenon one is in and growth thus of oneself. Good impact on the world depends on own growth. Whether one can structure the world around in a positive and beautiful way depends entirely upon whether one can do so in own space and mind. From a quantum physics sense, it is entirely so, because all forms that are held as form is so because it is held by an awareness. Without observation, there is no particle state. So there is also um, a will involved in which states are held. So over time, it takes that probabilistic distribution, there is definitely a will aspect involved. There was apparently a study, if I remember what I read years ago, right, done in Princeton University, that particular being a department, that particular thing was shut down. Of course, they always do that. The academy is run by rather evil entities. So the experiment was trying to find out if a quantum coin toss is influenced by the intent and will of a set of observers wanting it to go one way or the other. And they found out that, as per them, they said there was evidence that it was going in the direction the intent of the observers were, or the way the observers willed it. Statistically, it had a bias in that direction. If such a bias were not possible, free will would not be possible. Effort in the world would be futile. The world would be entirely random. Where an awareness exists, the awareness begins to order these vectors as it wills, just as I am typing, I am doing when I'm making these slides or when I'm talking, because the awareness can select these vectors. For the same reason, you can read these, you can listen to this or form an understanding. It is again an act of selection of that which is perceived in known vector space. So there is a phenomenon of selection done by the awareness of the set of awareness vectors, which is what they call the wave function, and the act of selection which projects into a, a, a surface dimension this vector set of a higher order described as a wave function in modern physics is the act of observation. Usual activity in every field. If you assume somebody is researching things in archaeology or trying to understand ancient writings, if the right spirit of research is there, that by this research I'll be able to understand deeper things and thereby evolve myself. Definitely, when the attention is offered to that goal, to that purpose, um, offered not in an outward sense, of when the attention is placed that way, it will definitely result in evolution, which is why monks reading scriptures evolve, while the brain dead academic spending even more time reading those scriptures does not evolve so much, because the attention is placed elsewhere in the case of the academic. The academic just wants to make a show of things. The proper placing of attention is associated with joyousness. If you remember the sentence in the Vyasa Bhasha commentary that I just read a few slides ago, the proper placing of attention brings joyousness, just as the understanding of ideas that I speak right now brings a sense of, you know, an explosion of joy in the awareness every time you discover something new. When the attention is placed properly, when the attention is not placed properly, what happens is there is another thread of thought happening. It keeps on saying, "Oh, this is a waste of time. If I just spend this time making money, I'd be happier," uh, which is not based on any reality. And that kind of false reasoning leads everybody to nowhere else but to disease and death. There has been no exceptions. So, which is of just an idea based not on logic, just like thinking if I drink 50 teaspoons of some kind of herbal tonic, I'll become healthy. No, I'll probably get uh, diseased because it'll be an overdose. The same is when people have those, narrow biased, running in just one direction form of thinking that drives them through their life right into the grave, through the corridors of all kinds of disease and usually all kinds of horrors. Assume one is studying anatomy. That is very profound because the universe systems and the bodily systems are directly related. Through samyama on the anatomical aspects, one gains understanding of different, virtually all aspects possible to the individual awareness spark of reality, of the underlying reality as well. Which is why people speak of, some traditions speak of, strengths associated with the pineal space, um, different, both the chakra systems and the associated glandular forms. The spinal anatomical structures reveal mathematical properties of the underlying mathematical artifact, which is perhaps better discussed in another talk. We usually study anatomy with just a very narrow worldly goal, like perhaps even just a simple curiosity of how the human body works, or because of their ambition to become a doctor in the worldly sense, which might not even be their ambition, but driven by people around them, or um, which again is in great part just driven by some outward sense of a world sense. There is no awareness of a deeper goal, and therefore there is no attention placed on the deeper goal. By the study of anatomy, the spinal structures and so forth is even needed to understand certain terminology found in the Yoga Sutras, such as the Kurmanadi. And not just by the study of anatomy is it understood, one needs to study um, etymology of words, sounds in different languages, symbolism left to us in different manuscripts. Um, in early stages, then from there one proceeds to a direct understanding, and the prajna arises. Finally, it is not as the final, but then as the prajna arises, one can understand directly. Um, so the forms of, even to understand geometrical forms such as the chevron, why were the entrance of the Egyptian pyramids in that particular form? In ancient days, it possibly had a series of chevrons. Now we see one or two, I guess, and one or two broken ones. Possibly it possibly had like four or so, four, I guess, uh, 4 or 5, perhaps. Mm, and the spinal anatomy um, and the base of the spine gives insights to why that would be. The the Kurmanadi, as per my present research, has to do with the, there is the spinal cord at the base of the spine bifurcating, and then there is one nerve that goes into the sacral coccyx space, and it, I think, integrates into that filamental thing which covers the brain spine uh, system, which keeps the cerebrospinal fluid in space, in its space. So for me, that perception of that point has to do with the zero and the infinity at the top of the space, for um, reasons that these two are at the boundaries of the same thing. In a mathematical sense, I need to uh, understand it deeper by thinking about it, or ponder deeper on it. But there is a process of uh, when a spin scan reaches a limit, um, there is a process of an inversion flip. So I believe these two perceptions are somehow bound, at least in the meaning sense, it has to be bound. For both these points need to be infinite dimensional. For if information is preserved in the geometrical collapse, the infinity of dimensions need to be collapsed into the zero. And the infinity of dimensions can also exist in the infinite order zero. Zeroth order zero and infinite order zero, thereby become uh, iso semantic at least. Um, is it the same uh, point? Uh, which is a deeper question. It has to do with the way the world machine structures these things. But my point is, uh, see, I have moved from anatomy to mathematics to symbolism to the Egyptian pyramid to uh, a few different other ideas as well in attempting to understand this. Um, in my head, a few different other ideas too. So uh, the purpose of study of me exploring those fields, or of one exploring those fields, ought be in the ideal sense, not be um, some kind of a frantic world drive. The issue with the world drive is, even though it can be glorified in media, there is no foundation to it, and people spiral out of a sense of, they spiral away from a sense of depth and meaning. People begin to feel like there is no deeper purpose to um, anything, deeper purpose to action, which gets people thrown into very depressed states, irrespective of how much glitter they place themselves in the midst of. We find that depression arising from purposelessness occur to a greater extent in societies where people have become so much glitter focused, they tend to abandon each other. It is not the issue that prosperity exists. The issue that is false education. The issue is the placing of awareness on false goals. Like, people can be taught in media that by just abandoning everybody around, one can achieve freedom. That's a very, you know, very nasty programming. People can be made to believe it is true through superficial visuals. People can be made to believe that staying like a zombie, never talking, that is somehow a thing of strength. While before social media and the mobile phones, people talked a lot. Everybody strong or whatever. The other mode of behavior that they teach, where people do not talk, and then all of a sudden there is a lot of violent action, is the state of brain of demented psychopaths, mentally diseased people, or demented psychopaths, or demented people who have a tendency to explosive bouts of violence. So that form of behavior is programmed through visual media. So the attention gets placed on becoming like that, which leads into empty states of society. People really becoming like what they are taught they are, some kind of empty bit of protoplasm floating around, good for nothing. All it needs to do is pile up a bit of glitter before it dies. And for it to live, it needs to keep barking at everybody. Uh, and so forth. A kind of world that has never existed. Such a world where people are barking at everybody does not exist in the most so-called primitive of tribes. The most primitive of tribes are usually the most meditative of tribes. They have very high ideals even. None of those prominent African tribes are mentally diseased people with no culture. They have their uh, profounder goals to reality, efforts to understand reality, theories, their forms of meditation, their forms of dynamic meditations, and so forth. So false theories are taught, and people made to repeat them to take their awareness away from where it ought be and where it naturally is. Naturally, people are aware they have a soul, uh, and that there is something beyond. While it is taught that taught to people that they do not have a, which is a very absurd thing to say, because people are aware. Atoms piled up cannot be aware. If awareness did not exist in any of those things, if all of it were some kind of, unaware things, the sum of it could have no awareness. Well, that is not how it works. It is not the sum of those vectors that is the awareness spark in itself, but the vectors are the world perception. It is those vectors projecting across the 0 points that take the form of particles. But again, the physics of today clearly has to bring in the observer into the picture. If you just do a Google, does the universe exist when we are not observing? So you'll find articles, uh, because that is the way phenomenon behaves in the lab. The states of observation exist only when those states are observed. Like the Schrodinger's cat, is the cat dead or alive? The dead or alive states arises only when the act of observation occurs. Of course, for a cat has its own awareness, but the thought experiment and the dilemma arises because that is what physics says, that the observer, it is the act of observation where um, one of a set of superposition states seem to be selected in theoretical quantum physics as well. They might argue that there are different ways to interpret the mathematics, but nevertheless, uh, the role of the observer in quantum physics is not something that one can discard or overlook. The very least, one could put it that way. So all of these fields can be thought of as understanding different aspects of the universe, perceiving different aspects of the universe. A kind of vipassana. Is like deviation, different aspects. Uh, the sound root vi in Sanskrit has that sense. Pashyana has a sense very similar to perceive. Of course, finally, what is talked about is direct perception. Um, when samadhi is achieved, the prajna principle enables direct understanding in the samadhi vipassana process, as per the Buddhist texts and traditions. Also, the samyama process of the Yoga Sutra. Some people have to work in rather dull fields like programming and so forth. It is dulling to the brain, mind, and the soul, and to self anatomy, everything. But then one could think of it, if there is no other option, like as a form of training in um, a flow state work, disciplined work, training of the mind to engage at a kind of work or action without getting depressed or whatever. So one can find a deeper purpose and meaning to what one is even having to do. But ideally, one should aspire for a form of action that is not dulling. If I'm to speak for myself, I obviously cannot uh, sit and program for somebody else's project just to gain a monthly salary. I would rather figure out how to sit in meditation on a mountain top without needing a lot of resources. How to have those abilities or super abilities, so to speak. Um, just like if you are asked to lay bricks all day, you probably wouldn't. Same thing. It is not that I'm not good at programming. I'm kind of it is easy for me, but um, my attention cannot go into doing something without meaning. If it is something that I'm researching on and I need to write a piece of code, I need to write some code, uh, and there's no easy option, I possibly would. And assuming that is needed at that point. In that action, I'm placing the awareness and the attention where it ought to be. If there was some kind of extreme emergency for money, maybe. But then if it is for myself, I'd find some better uh, other option which would preserve my freedom. Uh, the I was saying I wouldn't spend my time programming for a bit of money, but I'm not speaking against building resources in a positive sense. Of course, if one is to do things for the world, even one needs resources. Uh, what I'm speaking against is the false narrow focus that people are fed, as if they do not have any other option. Um, Neither do I have a sense of, uh, you know, not doing a business or anything. If that aligns with my purpose, goal, it gives me an inner goal, purpose, drive, uh, and it affects the world in a positive way. Or it could even be assume it is a kingdom and you need to build a weapons industry. That would be a good thing if the kingdom is positively aligned. And building a business and of course building a business is also a very powerful mode of action, which can unveil the underlying. But at times one needs to focus uh, more on a particular aspect such as study. It is not possible to do everything together. At times one needs to wait for the right phenomenon or function. Uh, Businesses depend upon where they are, what kind of society. So one, depending on all those factors, one can even postpone those actions. Um, that is the normal mode of functioning. What I'm speaking against is uh, people function with just that particular narrow goal, as if there is no other purpose to existence, as if the whole of everything were just getting that number from the bank and uh, repeating that cycle, as if they will get every possible joy by repeating that pattern, as if that is the only quote unquote smart reality, as if everything else needs to be ridiculed. Such a culture is promoted through television and so forth. By now, people understand uh, that they were being foolish by believing all that. They even get into the notion from television and so forth, that if people get a lot of money, then they can get over every dilemma in life, every uh, disease and every whatever. Well, we saw during the COVID phase that the diseases were treating almost everybody the same. And so forth. Which is what I'm speaking against is only an absence of logic, rationality. For logic, rationality, and everything to work, one has to have the right data. Datum is what is available to the awareness. Again, from the word da. The Sanskrit has the word dhatu. Dhatu means that which is, in that sense, that which is granted, placed, or that which is found in deeper pondering. Dha. If dha has to do with thi, or da, that which is being granted, that sound, possibly. So the without the right data, you cannot reason. If the starting point is a bunch of false statements, and you apply the logical operators and not and what or and whatnot, in fact, actual logic has even somewhat different sense to these operators, and the idea is somewhat different. It parallels the superpositioned possibilities in quantum mechanics. In my view, the actual logic, in my present view, the mathematical system of logic should reflect the structure of phenomenon as seen in quantum mechanics, because the phenomenon in quantum mechanics has to do with the way the awareness scans the mathematical artifact. So, like state A and state B can exist superpositioned. A state in which the world is, there is rain here and it is not raining, can exist together. So A superpositioned with not A, if the sense is, so that is both these things existing together in the and sense, is a higher dimensional possibility. We'll get to that afterwards. I'm just speaking based on some initial ideas, and that I might alter those ideas afterwards. So what was the topic of discussion? The states of okay, that the idea is all reasoning has to occur on facts that have some basis in reality. If the axioms of Euclid have no basis in reality, then a system of geometry cannot be built on it. So if your starting point, if your set of axioms are somehow work hard for money, you'll get money, then show arrogance and you'll be happy, that'll probably take you to hellish state on earth and in lives beyond. If the original datum had to account for the above and the below, the heaven, hell, the multiple dimensions that exist across planes, the parallel dimensions that exist on one plane, and so forth. If that is the objective reality, and your objective reality had just to do with a number in the bank as the cause and cure of everything, then obviously you're functioning on a wrong theory. Your logic is running on wrong assumptions. It is like doing brain surgery because your stomach hurts, assuming the brain is in the stomach. No, assuming as a starting point, the assumptions are wrong. The same happens with the fall of society that happens by believing the lies of the banking industry. If you look at it, everything falls, even the quality of food. People begin to sell what sells. They begin to add maximum possible sugar to things that feed infants. Because infants, 2-year-old kids, 4-year-old kids, 6-year-old kids, 10-year-old, all those kids are fed huge amounts of sugar, saying it will quote unquote increase energy, it will only lead to complete destruction of their health and bodily systems, because adding more sugar would lead to more sales would lead to more money, and they believe thereby getting more money they'll achieve more happiness and prosperity, which is not true. They turn psychologically diseased under their greed. A psychologically diseased person cannot experience choice. A psychologically diseased person who would harm society the way they do by using sugar as a drug to sell, would keep on doing things that are harmful not just to the outer world, to themselves as well. And because there exists the deeper, profounder realities, uh, they end up in profoundly damaged states. So the awareness has to be placed on what is factual data. So the Yoga Sutras, after discussing the Samyama process, says Tasya Bhumishu Vinyoga, meaning it is applied on aspects of reality. Just as I said, one can apply Samyama on own anatomy to understand the profounder universe. It is Bhumishu means Bhumi can mean earth, it can mean places, that which has come into being, that which is born into being. Bhu, thus own form, is also that which is the Bhumi that is referred here. Because in a sense, ultimately what the individual is perceiving is his own brain vector spaces, and so is the anatomical process and awareness of these vectorial transformations perceived across different order zeros, which would be in a sense the chakra systems and so forth. The spinal anatomy is also involved with the mathematical perception of the mathematical transformative geometries, inherent mathematical transformations and the operations involved that the awareness takes in structuring the DNA code into vectors, which forms the world perception. So in a more on a more surface sense, you'll find ancient yogic texts saying samyama on, say, like the tip of the nose here, there, on, or the Agnya chakra space, or the heart space, and sometimes samyama is done on different phenomena, such as the emergence of the body sense and the weight sense from the ether sense, which has to do with the breath forming the body sense as well. When in samyama on that phenomenon, the ability to travel through ether, fly, so-called, is gained as per the Yoga Sutras. It is gained actually. If you try doing that, take a deep breath, see the ether principle or the air principle fill the body. If you place the awareness in between the movement between that form, you will suddenly begin to develop a point of perception where the weight, lightness perception arises. If you keep the awareness on that, suddenly you'll begin to feel something form, an energy system form, energy, whatever, a something form at the solar plexus navel area. Then, after that formation is done, if you need to fly like Superman, the awareness is just acting on that space at the solar plexus navel space. Just as if I want to lift my hand, my awareness is acting on my muscle. Slightly. One is not too much aware that the muscle is being acted on by the awareness, yet one could say my awareness is on my hand or the arm muscle when I'm moving my arm or lifting a weight. Likewise, assuming that ability is formed, one wants to fly, a slight sense of awareness movement would be felt in the solar plexus uh, abdomen space, and the body would uh, move through space either even at a very dashing speed. So Tatsya Bhumishu Vinyoga means understanding the world phenomenon in aspects by applying Vinyoga in different aspects of the phenomenon, Bhumishu, the Samyama process. I spoke of superpowers gained through the uh, Samyama process, and that is also discussed in discussed from a somewhat different, um, somewhat different, or the way you view it, a slightly different angle in Buddhist texts such as the text by Buddhaghosa, Vishuddhimagga, which again involves that process of the awareness applied in the samadhi, samyama kind of process, jhana process, uh, on aspects of phenomenon within the own space. In the uh, in one of those in the Buddhaghosa approaches, it is on a stage the mental image, and then one goes beyond the mental image into the um, what is often translated as the counterpart sign. I had a talk on that in earlier uploaded here on this channel, should be on this playlist as well. If you are viewing this on this playlist, on that playlist. When I spoke of this, of the way the supernormal ability of flight works, I was just speaking on a vague perception of it. It is not that at this stage I can fly around or anything. I'm not having any of those weirdo superpowers. But then I believe a bit of perception exists for almost for a good proportion of people. Um, if you just give attention to what happens in that process, you'd possibly be able to perceive uh, the from where I was talking. So here you find the Vishuddhimagga of Buddhaghosa. I have not studied these texts in detail, neither have I studied the commentaries of Yoga Sutra or anything in detail. But again, here's a listing in Wikipedia. You see the 5 qualities on the left and 7 sets of qualities on the right. So there's some kind of a grid formed. In the grid, if you look at the columns, the ordering is Shraddha, Virya, Smriti, that is Sati, Samadhi, and Prajna. It was before I saw this listing, that I was saying Smriti has to be associated with the Buddhist idea of Sati. So the Buddhists had a greatly detailed breakdown like this. Buddhist texts can get into a great amount of detail. So as I understand, and as per my understanding of now, the way to study this text is you have to take that world, the state, and then you have to try to perceive it within you, uh, all these qualities, and you have to try to, within your own awareness, perceive the factors that are being mentioned and in what aspects they apply, how they apply. So the awareness gains familiarity with those ideas and is therefore able to use that as markers or guiding points on the path. A map of the see, the Yoga Sutras cannot be taken as, a cookbook, or you repeat this after or start from this step, do that, do this. No, but an overall understanding helps, and to form an understanding you need to be actively on the path. It obviously cannot be understood just with a dictionary. If if one were to somehow assume one could just pick up a dictionary and understand Yoga Sutras, one wouldn't get into the depths of what is being said. For one, the statements are extremely terse. What this Buddhist text expands in great detail, not just this text, different Buddhist texts expand in great detail, is a four or five word sentence, a very terse aphorism. So these two traditions are not different in any sense. If one wants to find more details, different aspects and views, one could look into the other tradition. One could even explore ideas in mythology where the same sound and name appears. If it is the name of a mythological character, what role does the character play? And not just the role in a drama, but what is that character? What is the symbological situationing of it in the mythology? That is not to say mythology is all myth, because there is an inner and outer reality, and some of them can be myth making to preserve ideas. Because with story like qualities, it becomes another stream of preserved knowledge. In Sanskrit, it is Prajna Paramita, by the way. It possibly has to do with the para of the Gade Gade Paragade, the transcendent. I pronounce it as Prajna Paramita, which was just reading from the English. This slide was to as an addendum to fix that. Prajna Paramita. Prajna Paramita. With the proper Shraddha, that is the attention established the right way, the world joys and celebrations are integrated onto the path itself. Just like if you look at the Indian traditions, they have a celebrative quality, a kind of familial celebrative quality, and so forth. They had it even up to recent times. What happened was, in an era, these knowledge systems were diluted. Then they were, because it divided people using false ideas. There were invaders, and then there was this false Western education, which completely denied anything inner. The reasoning was applied to just the narrow outer datum from the world. So it began to, as we see now, weaken the human systems, human awareness, the awareness of what a person can be, what an individual can be, the possibilities of evolution and so forth, into a very dead world where machines begin to dominate. A human attention is placed into the machine. So what happened is, assume a celebration like say Diwali or any festival, it just becomes like I could take a break from the psychopathic work students are being made to do in schools. Assume the student will think of it as just a break from that psychopathic, while the mainstream of action is that uh, driven psychosis that kids are driven through in schools. There is very little knowledge that is imparted for all the drama. Everybody else would think of it as, you know, let the kid live for a few days in freedom and then go back to this. So the whole purpose of any celebration or whatever becomes like a event. The education tells there's no other purpose to it. It is all just worthless mythology, worthless superstitions, worthless beliefs. While the original purpose is to continuously evolve one's joys, the evolution of deeper perception and the evolution of joys run in parallel often. Because the perception of the profounder is described as pleasure, rapture, joy, and so forth. And of course, it is not some unrooted, wild kind of sense always, uh, because integration of the being is happening into the profounder planes as well. So that there is an integration beyond being affected by the world phenomenon as well. So the education keeps feeding a lie. The placing of attention has to fall on those lies, because people have to function based on those lies to um, earn a living. It requires even a great amount of strength and a sense of adventure to begin exploring what is beyond. As of now, there are more and more people wanting to understand things, but in a particular era, it was pretty much the British education that got drilled into people's brains. So we find even parents forcing people away from attempting to understand things, assuming uh, everything is gained by just focusing on the banking apparatus, which is the uh, work life thing, which is taken to be some kind of high ideal in today's India, unfortunately. The more frantically people work, the less the progress of the world as well. The world becomes more and more chaotic. Intelligent work involves trying to minimize work. The goal of every design, the goal of every endeavor is to even amplify joys and minimize work. The goal is not to work for the sake of working. Work for the sake of working, for the sake of working, for the sake of earning money, for the sake of working is a very empty cycle, leading into the void of nothing worthwhile, just as would have been felt while I was describing it. Um, so joys, celebrations, all had the goal of actually evolving one's energies, and in a very natural way. Same is the goal of everything. All kinds of friendships, um, normal good friendships, activities, friendships had a sense of, a deeper goodness. Right now it has been entirely replaced with a false sense of competitiveness and so forth, which is damaging to oneself and damaging to the other, leading to evil karma, leading to totally demented states of existence, drags a whole society down, drags the whole nation down. So those kinds of ideas needs to be entirely discarded, and it can only be done by placing the attention where it needs to be placed, which is the possible evolution of oneself through profoundly understanding reality and through engaging the normal joyous modes of existence. The false education also presents a view of spirituality which is about dullness, deprivation, and so forth, which is a lie, which is evidenced by the fact that the scriptures such as the Bhagavad Gita enjoin people to ahara vihara, yukta ahara viharasya, Mahara means world joys. Vihara has a sense of great celebrativeness. Grand kingdoms were designed with a goal of celebrativeness or of grand joys in mind, not a superficial hopping around. Even if you look at depictions of ancient societies, such as in Lord of the Rings, there is an innate sense of virtue, celebrativeness, people wanting to do good for each other, people standing together in war. Even war becomes a form of joyousness, celebration, a display of virtue and strength. And it is not by the good fought without a reason. It is done to defend the good for deeper and profounder purposes, and purpose, a meaning to life shines through all that. Just as I had said, with a deeper goal, the purpose of education has a sense of discovering the absolute, which is a very intense form of joy. They say, if you look at the anecdotes about scientists, they say scientists experience a huge joy when discovering something. But then this process is about discovering the whole of everything. At least that is the goal. And then going beyond. So if you think about it, even the joy of discovery is extremely high. When established in such a growth process, even if the growth is just a tiny bit, when people interact, there is a celebrative and joyous quality to it. There is a sense of bonhomie, wanting the good of the world. People are not interacting out of a sense of, survival, greed, competition, fight amongst each other to gain the favor of the banker, that is, gain more money. I have described how money works in one of the earlier lectures. I'll describe it again just so that people are aware. If they're just listening to this one particular lecture alone, assume they have given money in interest to everybody. If two people are given 100 rupees and they are asked to return it as 110, and nobody else is given money, there is no way both of them can return. So one person has to fall, and the bank gains his belongings. The banker gains his belongings. The other person has to take 10 from the individual who fell, and he'll return 110 to the banker. So the banker has gained a number from that side and resources from this side, and they can generate numbers as they will. So if the same process is done to an entire society and people are taught to fight amongst each other, that survival is the goal, and all those false theories, then such a society gets built. The history of the world is not what they teach. There have been different timeline flips as well. There have been advanced societies. That is why these advanced forms of thinking is found in ancient societies. A simple primitive people cannot come up with such sophisticated theories, mythology, so forth, and even sophisticated buildings, art, and so forth. A lot of it is hidden. A lot of it disappeared because of timeline flips due to fall of human awareness and invasion from parasitic alien species, which is why those ruling dynasties, such as the British, are lookalikes of the reptilian species and have a history even of hunting and eating humans, eating human flesh, cannibalism. They have been documented to do that, from the falsely glamorized ideals of Vlad the Dracula. In stories they can idolize it, but in reality it's just killing and eating people. Eating and eating human flesh, think about it. Even the British royalty themselves have admitted has the bloodline from there. And even otherwise, that is what they do. Peter Thiel, one of the co-founders of PayPal, established a company which collects blood from young people so as to attempt to restore youth to old people. That is a very weird idea. Human will not think about it. A normal human will not accept that procedure, young or old. But they're not collecting blood for that purpose. It is a cover. Those species have existed on Earth, and they have existed on, it is almost like a delicacy for them. So some of their traits align with the traits of other species like the reptilians. Um, and there has been mixing of blood. These false royalties uh, are often the reptilian blood mixed royalties with the other subhuman species. Celebrations and joys turn empty when Shraddha is elsewhere. Assume they think the goal of celebrations is to release steam and go back to work for money, or that the purpose of study is to finally work for money. Then the attention is elsewhere. No matter how disciplined the work or anything, nothing evolves from it. And that is true. Even like I was saying in one of the previous, in a few of the previous talks, food, all those things should have a goal of evolving the human through the joy it brings, through the long-term health it brings. Therefore, taste, joy, these things are not different. There is no such thing as a spiritual person avoiding strong food that strengthens. If you look at the ancient writings, if you look at Christianity, if you look at ancient Buddhist writings, the examples set by the ancient teachers, they all ate beef, they all drank wine moderately. Socrates speaks of wine. Uh, there's a whole discussion on this, and it does not conclude in saying that wine should be avoided. Uh, the Vedic writings speak of beef as good food for the well prepared beef as the good food for the aspirant, spiritual aspirant. Wines are natural part of uh, research into what strengthens the human body. In texts of Ayurveda across eras, the original Ayurveda was different. It had more to do with the awareness and using the awareness strengths uh, to fix the form. Then it had to do with the understanding the ability of the Vedic mantras to do that. Mantra has to do with geometries that unveil to the awareness profounder strengths. In my view, as of now, I have discussed that in one of those earlier talks, discussed a few ideas on that in one of the earlier talks. So food, games, joyous interaction, celebrations, even work, businesses, when there is a profounder, greater goal and a sense to it, deeper sense to it, when people do things together with a greater view, things like that all begin to have a deeper purpose when the underlying attention is on the greater goal of human life. All of that loses meaning when the underlying attention, Shraddha, is devoid of a sense of the deeper goals. If people think the only purpose of eating food is to go back to work, or people even do meditation so that they can so-called work better, this is worse than a lab rat. A lab rat would rebel against such a state. A lab rat would need to be caged, drugged and shocked to behave like that. And I assume nobody believes, no matter how much toys or no matter how much happy feed the lab rat is given, its existence is that good or joyous or with any deeper purpose, sense of inner purpose. It's a half-brained entity. Same with humans who live like that. It is not frantically doing things that builds a world. Assume you want to structure your room. You need to calm yourself down. Get rid of the unessential things. Think about what you need to do in life. So thereby reduce those management points. Have a clear environment in which you can sit and meditate, study, grow, thereby experience greater joys and have a sense of beauty, clarity to that space and a sense of ease and so forth. Availability of resources you need to ensure, a good environment you need to ensure. The same principle applies in structuring a society. You cannot structure your room by throwing things around in a frantic way, doing a lot of things, digging the earth beside your bed, now, or whatever, all right? Or climbing the wall, attempting to climb up the walls. Uh, you you cannot just do random things and a lot of hectic action and assume you will derive something out of it. First of all, you won't do anything worthwhile with that room. You might keep your brain engaged for a while and thereby avoid worry. That is one reason why people begin to find some peace of mind when they keep doing something. It is like taking alcohol to just forget your worries. I spoke of taking wine, and it has a, when the spiritual strengths are strong, a bit of wine actually amplifies the energies, makes the awareness more bright. They speak of Socrates in Plato's own writings uh, as all the more brighter when uh, drunk, as in after a drink. Uh, and they, I think in Symposium or some, one of those things, one of the individuals in the writing says, Socrates drinks what is kept in front of him, but nobody is seen Socrates drunk. Um, so the wine is usually described as a drink of the gods, and that it destroys demons. When the awareness of those inner processes is there, it is possible to use wine that way. Otherwise, what happens is uh, with people, I have never been drunk in that sense. So, with people who are prone to that kind of response, the demons go wild. They lose the awareness of their own systems, so to speak, their own. Even some people who do drugs and all, you cannot even say for sure if that is the same person. Another entity can even take over in those states, which is dangerous and which is to be avoided. One has to hold one's flame. So, back to the topic. Even if one wanted to build a society, one needs a level of wisdom. Otherwise, one's actions would be all random. If an army of a kingdom is to be good, there should be goodness among those people. There should be goodness among people in the kingdom. For goodness to exist, there should be wisdom. For wisdom to exist, the awareness, the attention should have been placed in the right direction, where it ought to be placed, in the profounder, in the deeper sense. So without the proper Shraddha, wisdom cannot exist in a kingdom. So if a lot of money, prosperity, weapons exist, they'll begin destroying themselves and the greater world as well. Assume they have worked out a theory of how to build zombie cities, grand zombie cities. The cities will have, no matter what the architecture, an inherent sense of dullness and emptiness, especially with the modern kind of architecture. And people will fall into a set of meaninglessness. Meaninglessness exists in the most beautiful places on earth. People seem to spiral into depression even faster in those places. Because I think with the false education, they tend to discard soulful action even faster. Because the delusion that the outward glitter can provide a replacement for what is soulful acts stronger there. And only when the soul sense is destroyed, they realize sitting and gawking at a happy place will not provide anything. Which is why in Switzerland and all, you find even assisted suicides a lot. They are finding a market for suicide pods where old people can just drag their suicide, old or anybody can drag their suicide pods to some happy view place and, push a button to fucking die. So, for world joys to exist, for a beautiful world to be structured in the inner and outer sense, The attention needs to be placed in the right direction. Even some some traditional societies paid a lot of attention to cuisine, French, Italian, ancient Indian perhaps, traditional Indian did play a lot of attention to complex tonics even, very difficult to make. And the cuisines would have been elegant and uh, structured with a great amount of thought in a particular era. Now it has given way to what just spikes things up for the moment, like a lot of spices. Spices are to be avoided as per ancient Indian writings. Gentle herbs are good. Spices such as chili are harmful because it is the body uh, that gets, it's energies that get chaotized. When one is totally immune to all that, it is okay. But otherwise, Zen writing says the body is the eye. Nobody would want spices falling into the eye. It becomes almost like a drug. People do not apply reason to find out what is food that is both tasty, nourishing, both in the short term and the long term. Spices, along with a lot of sugars, what do people feel like after eating that? People feel dull, wanting to sleep. It is the same way it acts on the anatomy. It will chaotize the anatomy. The physical form will not form well. The mind will not function properly. People will fall into dullness, and dullness leads to an inability to understand things, reason, zombie work. But at the same time, food can be extremely tasty, extremely nourishing, almost heavenly, and nourishing, long-term healthy. At the same time, if enough attention and reasoning is given to understanding it, to go about understanding it, one can either research on own, study different cuisines of different traditions, the theories that went behind it, go by own deeper perception. These are endeavors that should happen in every single family space. These used to happen in even a tiny amount, usual, I mean, a bit, and in a very usual sense. Family was a space where people wanted to make good food for their kids, so forth. And there was a celebrative quality to things. People used to have joy, fun, and being together, exploring different cuisines, playing different games. Now all that has disappeared with the false theory that everybody should become so-called strong, independent, and so-called work for money. And people have become weak, extremely dependent on the supermarkets. If that made people strong, independent, why is 50% of the populace diabetic in Kuwait, where they have achieved monetary greatness? Over 10% in almost a good proportion of nations. People are being weakened, destroyed. People need that structuring interaction of energies to form the soul sense. The Gita says one who prepares food for oneself uh, eats nothing but sin. When there is no other option, one can do that. If one is just, food has also the sense of world enjoyments. If one is just focused on piling up things for oneself, or think about living in an apartment and the only thing that you do is somehow play video games or watch TV and then prepare food for yourself and eat. That is extremely dulling. And people's vitality keeps disappearing in such a state. In a vitality dissipated state, they cannot engage world joys either. It is just that they show on TV that just by living like that you can become so strong, independent, then go out, have a lot of fun. No, because the physical form is not designed for that. It is like they show on TV that you can just wade through the Antarctica or walk through the Amazon, walk through the deserts and somehow survive and so forth. It is not possible for a normal human to walk a few hundred meters through a desert or through the Antarctica or survive in the Amazon alone or anything. I'm saying the human form has limitations. Even with a lot of training, the human form has huge limitations. Now, if people are willing to let go of their delusions, they know their form has limitations. In the movies, people will jump from building to building or fall from 20 meters, 40 meters. But if you attempt it in real life, it is either immediate death or death in a few attempts. There might be some circus acrobats who can pull that off, but circus acrobatics, I'm not sure to what percentage of people it would. The circus performer state would bring a deeper sense of joy or anything. So to structure one's life endeavors, keep on structuring joys day after day, and in a steady sense, one needs to place the attention where it ought to be placed. One needs to have that view that I need to do the right thing, understand things deeper, study things deeper. The right form of action will deepen my understanding. It will clear the awareness, and so forth. Which is why the eightfold path also is described in a somewhat structured sense. It is describing different aspects, though it becomes somewhat theoretical, and life itself is actually more a lived and normal, natural sense, soulful. Theory is difficult to understand. Theory is when you've completely forgotten whatever is. Like the principle that people can be together and exploring joys of life in a virtuous, structured, strong way, strengthening themselves and thereby strengthening and brightening up the world, is a natural, normal, innate knowledge that people have till it gets blurred through false theories, through aggregates across lifetimes, and through false tendencies. The awareness then picks up. When people are continually punished in their education and made to behave in a false way, just pursue marks, just pursue money, they'll repeat that. They'll begin to hand out punishments to others, which is why a lot of school teachers even are psychopaths, giving out punishments for no reason. A ton of punishments for things that can be taught joyously through, say, virtual reality games. It is a known psychological phenomenon called transference. Children, especially girls, begin to imitate teachers often because they are transferring or imitating out that perception of power that they saw for an instant. So that form of transference, people who have gone through traumas tend to push into the world, even unconsciously, similar kinds of traumas till they begin to understand or become aware of what they're doing. And that can also repeat as certain pathological states in which they amplify trauma upon themselves. They begin to transfer it to themselves in cycles, so to speak. Like a cycle of worry. If that cycle has been taught, people will begin to act in that cycle. Like some people are taught that they need to frantically do things to avoid trouble. Frantically study for the exam, frantically do this, frantically do that. So that franticity becomes in their minds a state of functioning to avoid trouble, which is not true. It is destroying their brain, destroying their anatomy, driving their cortisol levels high, blood pressure levels high. It is destroying their health. It is destroying that moment in which they could be peaceful. Likewise, people have thought greed for money will make things good. The most beautiful societies get destroyed. Even mountainside societies in India, some of the most beautiful Christian places have been really smoked up in greed for money. They are not even aware of the They were not even aware of the beauty of their lands and how beautiful lives they could have lived there. They destroyed it in the name of tourism, everything. Not a good building exists, nothing exists, and the air quality is like 150, 200. I'm speaking of places like Shimla in the Himalayas. It's a hellhole. Greedy nations destroy themselves fast. Usually those nations are taught greed so that they get exploited by societies controlled by those people who live in ease. So they, like those nations which export resources to nations that do not have resources, uh, are in poverty because they are throwing away their resources to people who want to control them using that artifact of money, because their attention is not placed properly. Their attention is placed on the bank. They're not even seeing what they have. Like the example of a lakeside or beachside cottage. Every poor fisherman has access to such a place or has the ability and the resources to build a beautiful cottage. But they will not do that because the attention is placed elsewhere. They have the resources to live on the finest ocean food. They have the resources to uh, live in a beachside cottage. Think about it. And beachside is a place where people can have all the fun in the world. But if the attention is made such that they need to be ignorant of all that and somehow just try to build up money, then they become poor people when the best of resources exist around them. I'm not saying they should not trade or anything, but I'm saying but there should be an underlying awareness of what they already have. The the which the highest item of society should grant the poorer sections of society through education, not a fancy education on how to build AI machines that will kill humanity finally, or things of the sort. Of fundamental education in how to do Zen, how to build an aesthetic cottage, and how to beautifully interact with one another. That will be like heaven. And how to keep the environment beautiful. That foundation can be taken as a structuring point to build fairy tale villages, beautiful villages as one might see in the best days and times and places in Europe, Japan, and so forth. There is not a whole lot of drama needed. Everybody moving into cities becoming chaotic. People do not know what to do actually. In the name of education, a billion miles of traffic gets piled up every day, while education can be taken to homes over the internet in 1,000 times higher quality than what they find in today's average schools, and in 1,000 times more joyous way, and so on. What I'm saying is the right placing of attention and the awareness of the deeper purpose need to be there for meaningful action to occur. Without the inner purpose, people just want to make some money and then escape into some happy framework and enjoy that money. Nothing happy occurs actually. One disaster after disaster turns up. In a spiritual sense, they begin to lose the deeper awareness, merit, and so forth. They are assuming money and things from the supermarket will remedy it. We do not find anything remedying anything for the so-called royalties, evil royalties of today. The original royalties were royalties because of their spiritual nature, not a fake spiritual nature. It was visible, which is why the crown chakra, to command in the royal sense was called Ajna. Ajna chakra is there in Sanskrit. So because the spiritual wisdom was there, the people naturally accepted them as the guiding point for their spiritual growth as well, and for the management of the greater resources. Today it is entirely different. We find from these fake fake reptilian royalties, all kinds of emo stories emerging as well. All the evil stories, their evil past, their existence is a bit of more than average horrors. It is just being hidden by the glitter that is put in front of the world. Like Zen breathing can be done to achieve the state of enlightenment. Zen, not breathing, keeping the awareness on the breath. Zen breathes into the hara space. Assume you're just sitting down, focusing the breath flow in a natural way down into the hara space. Hara is the lower abdomen space along the floor of the body. Because it is the breath that evolves the form, and the breath is a function of the universal ether. The awareness is soon taken to that which is beyond the ether planes, the absolute. Just by the attention placed on the breath, seeking the beyond, one goes beyond. But then there are 1,000 different breathing methods, this, that, breathing done as part of medical advice to improve lung capacity, um, uh, for improving athletic endurance and so forth. None of that does anything, though the action is the same, breathing. Because the awareness is placed in a different sense. People do pranayama, yoga, and all for health, and they do not achieve anything. Even if they do it very meticulously whole life, they might achieve a slightly better health, because that is all the awareness knew exists. That is all its attention were on, its focus were on. The attention on the profounder, the possibilities were taken away by the false education. So even the same action can turn entirely futile when the attention is elsewhere, in its core, deepest, and profoundest aspects. The attention being where it ought be, the usual joys and the normal activities of the world, the familial forms, people discussing things, people coming together to study things, to understand things deeper. All those becomes great, sustainable, long-term joys that evolve people from day to day. When people want to understand Zen, the attention has been placed properly. And then they read and in a very calm and peaceful sense discuss what they have read, not in a sense of showing off or writing papers to get famous in academia or anything, but in a sense of normal, friendly evening discussions, taking their time, ease. They begin to enjoy what they read, what they discuss, the nature around. They begin to enjoy each other's discussions, the good friendships. That is what we see in Plato's writings. Socrates and friends are having easy, friendly talks and discussions, and there's a lot of joys, discussions, drinking, and all that you find there in that setting. So, in that easy state, there is a deeper appreciation of the world, of the outward sensory world as well, a deeper exploration of how to build the world. The experience of the world turns more vibrant, joyous, and all that is a function of own spiritual evolution, growth, becoming better, thereby achieving a sense of meaning, purpose, depth, and all that. Again, when the same form of action is done with the attention elsewhere, even if it be in the most ideal and disciplined forms, even if it be some kind of charity, so forth, all of it is essentially futile in evolving oneself, in evolving one's spiritual strengths, inner joys that are sustained across days and through a lifetime, things that increase one's virtue merit, and so forth.